Hello everyone, how you doing today? Thought I'd show you an update and on this carrier that I've been working on, as well as some couple creations that got released over the weekend, being the MCRN Sparrow and MCRN Talon T2. Um, Most of my effort was actually put into skinning this carrier. It's not done yet. I need to get to the bottom of it as well and part of the top of it. But it is definitely coming along pretty good now. And I decided to go with the Martian base color scheme on it, and I think that works out pretty good. So yeah, this is a fun one. I'm kind of excited on working on this one right now, and the interior is going to be kind of fun too because that's also going to be asymmetrical entirely. So um, be different from one side of the ship to the other. But definitely coming along at this point in time. And I also noticed in the comments that there was, at least one person that liked the white look of it as well. And so what I'm doing is I'm creating an alternative color set for all of the Martians actually. And this is kind of a test right now, so I just kind of respawned the ship. It's a slightly older version of it over here with an alternative color palette to to match the human stuff more. So it's basically like your white and gray and black look on it, which I think is I like the looks of this a lot too. So it's you'll be able to do both. I figure that is the best scenario as to pick one color set or the other. It can do both. The same color palette also applies to other Martian stuff. So here's like a Talon T2 uh, kind of recolored with that alternative color set. Now, one issue I ran into that I'm going to have to add a couple more colors to the palette is the flight decks or runways. Um, they needed to stay dark, and when I recolored the rest of the ship, it did this to the flight deck. So basically, I'm adding a couple more colors and using those colors specifically to texture like runways and flight decks and things like that. So that will fix that problem. I might have to make some updates to existing ships, which won't change their looks or appearance stock whatsoever, and you won't even know that it was done. But like the same thing I'm going to have with this ship, if I recolored it to the alternative uh, texture, or I'm sorry, alternative color set. Let me just do that a second. I'll show you what happens. Um, and I've got that on 2 right now. So if I apply that to the Tashi, I got the same effect with the this area of the ship, in which I'm going to have to probably recolor some of these things and use a different color um, because it caused a lot of interior issues. And that's where I'm kind of holding that up. So I plan on the next Martian releases, or the next releases I do, probably next Sunday. I'm going to have this color set as well available for everything, and I'm going to try to get some updates to existing ships that you won't even notice, but will color correct a lot of these problems that I've got with the current set. Um, you can kind of take a look at what the Tashi also looks like recolored. Um, I think it's dialed in a little bit better than it used to be now. I still got some issues, but it's not too bad at this point in time. And I think that would be a good way to go. So then all the Martian stuff could be used and look like the human stuff as well. And I don't have to pick and choose on what I'm going to do for each creation. Um, so let's see. Other than that, on this Sparrow Tier 1 SV that was released, I did take everyone's advice. I got rid of the warp core. I added an O2, increased the storage to 4K, increased the ammo storage to 1K. Added 2 more Gatling guns and a front reverse thruster. And that is putting the ship at still some wiggle room on CPU tier 1, which is pretty cool. Now Now, the strengths of this ship and weaknesses. The strengths is this thing is extremely fuel efficient compared to like any other ship I've made, like MX-1 included. This thing gets better gas mileage. And essentially, like right now, if you take a look at my fuel, I'm at 44% on my, it's got one fuel tank only, one, and I'm at 44%. And even at 44%, when I take off and fly, I'm getting nearly 40 minutes of actual flight time, which is really good. I mean, far more fuel efficient than existing ships doing this model. Now, of course, side effects to this ship as well. One, you don't have any strafing, and you definitely want to keep areas in front of you so you can take off again. Like for instance, if there's something in my way here, it would be challenging to take off. But I also noticed that adding that front thruster up here serves as a brake, more or less. So I can now land better and quicker, and not have such a guessing game on where the ship's actually going to land when I'm flying above. Now also, what this does is give you the ability to kind of hover in the air. So if you're targeting a POI or shooting stuff, I don't have any ammo in here, but you can kind of hover there and accurately aim at stuff and not fall out of the sky, which I also think that was a pretty good bonus. Now, one thing that I find a little bit weird with the flight model is typically turning, like I'm turning right now, it does not pitch a ship automatically one direction or another. It just kind of keeps it that way. So when I'm actually flying, what I'm doing is I'm using the Q and E keys, or pitch and roll, or the pitch keys, roll keys, my fault, to kind of turn into the direction that I'm actually trying to fly, which I think actually makes it, I don't know if it actually turns faster that way. I don't think it does, but it feels better. It just feels better. This doesn't feel right to me, although mathematically it probably is correct. But I think with this flight model, if there was a way to actually make it automatically lean into the direction that you're turning, I think would feel a whole lot better. And like I said, I'm simulating that by actually holding the keys down when I'm turning, but just that motion alone makes it just feel so much more fun, I guess. It just feels better. Doesn't necessarily fly better that way. It's just, it feels better. So I thought I'd throw that out there as a possible option of ways I think you could improve the flight model on this. But as it's going, the ship is pretty usable. It's just weird. A carrier base like this with a runway, though, is a really good idea for a ship like this, because it allows you to take it off and land it nicely, and you kind of want a runway, which I think is really cool, because I built ships with runways before too, and I was called out on that, like, well, you don't really need that because everything can just take off vertically. Well, now there's an excuse to actually have a runway that actually works, so that's cool. Not to mention, I like carriers anyway. I think they're, for like military ships, they're one of the coolest ships out there. I mean, I like battleships and stuff too, but carriers are just always just cool. So I particularly like to build them. And now I can actually make them work with stuff. So what a bonus. So that's about all I've got for today. I'm still working out a lot of little details on things, but when I do release all this, it's going to have an alternative color palette available for all the Martian stuff that's going to work and allow you to colorize them in the human look as well. So I don't have to pick and choose on what I want, one thing to be or the other thing to be. They both can be both things, and that's great because they are similar. The Martians are not a big stretch from the human faction either. They got a little bit of differences going on for them, but it's not super noticeable overall. So anyway, hope you enjoyed this, and yeah, if you want, you can check out these new creations on the workshop now. This one and this one, and curious on any feedback on those, on how they work in game, any options or things that they could do better, or modifications, things like that. Other than that, I'm just really hunkering down on this carrier until I can get this completed. Now, I do plan on releasing the Martian base this upcoming Sunday, and I might, and I say might, release this as well. I've been sitting on this one for a while now, but I'm worried about flooding the workshop with too many creations. Like, I just, in the last, well, week and 1 day now, I've released 4 individual creations, and that's it's a fair amount, and I gotta kind of watch that as well, so I don't want to release too much stuff. It's just I got a lot of stuff to release, and I'm trying to catch up. So I had about a 3-week stretch there that I wasn't releasing anything, kind of waiting for updates and patches and the experimental version to play out and things like that. So that's kind of where we're at right now. As in CPU, it gets brought up a lot on CPU, and from my understanding, that the devs intended CPU mainly for multiplayer and not so much for single player. And my gist on the CPU, of course, I wanted to learn it, and that's why I've been building a lot of CPU-based creations, especially like in SVs. I haven't touched the HVs still, but I needed to learn. I needed to learn the flight model, what I can build at different tier ranges. So I know that as just a builder in general. Now, does that mean I'm going to follow CPU on everything? No, that doesn't. It basically, it's going to come down to if the creation whatever I'm building, if it can be CPU without harming it in what the design was supposed to be, then it will be CPU. I don't see any reason not to make it CPU. It's not a big deal adding a couple CPU blocks if that's all I'm doing. If it's something that would not work as in CPU, and I'm not so much concerned about CVs or bases, but it's mostly about larger SVs and HVs, then I just won't make those CPU. Now, right now, I'm not actually designing any of those particular items, as I've got this, a base, and a big creel thing I want to get going on, and I also want to make a legit space carrier. So I've got all those kind of in the near-term things, and I believe all of them are going to be CPU because I'm not going to have the limitations on any of this to not have it CPU. Where I'd probably find the biggest problem is on items like HV tanks and things like that, especially if they're beefier, bigger, thicker walled, heavier tanks. I have to play with it, and I don't know the results yet, but I fear like existing creations I have, like the Basilisks, Demos, and Gigantes, would not fit well with the CPU tiers. But I'm not 100% sure on that until I start messing with them and removing RCS and seeing how they play out. Also, you don't need as many thrusters on these newer creations as you used to. And obviously, as in the RCS stuff, in the new flight model, I'm trying to avoid using RCS if possible. Like, all of these creations are not using any RCS at all. This carrier is not using any RCS at all as well. And currently it's built of combat steel. It's not quite finished, and it's not to its full weight yet. But as in flying this thing around, it does pretty good. In fact, it's a little twitchy yet. So I'm hoping once it gets weighted down, with more blocks and stuff. Originally, I was thinking I might convert this to a lesser material than combat steel, but I'm thinking at this point, due to the fact that it flies quite well, and I actually wouldn't mind having it flying a little bit lesser than this. Well, maybe on the roll. On turning, it's not great though. It's I'm really kind of cranking this mouse around here to get this to turn good, but it is a bigger CV, and I think that fits fine with it as well. So I'm not so worried about having this thing fly. And originally too, when I was first building this, I did not put in temporary CPU blocks, and that was a big mistake on on my part. I didn't realize it because I could not get this thing to steer at all, and I was like banging my head against the wall. I'm like looking at the purses thinking, well, you know, the thruster arrangement on this CV is not that much different than what the Persis is, and the Persis handles probably too well, and this thing wasn't steering at all. Well, it came down to I didn't have the CPU blocks installed in here, so it was running at extremely low efficiency, so much so that I couldn't turn at all. And then once I added like the CPU blocks, that fixed all that up, and then I could actually test it and fly it around decently. So just keep that in mind if you are building something and it's not working. Make sure your CPU blocks are in there. And if you don't have CPU on in the first place, then you don't have to worry about it at all. It won't affect it. So, but this one I intend on having this tier 4 CPU. And I brought this up last time too, and I don't necessarily, I like the CPU tiers for CVs. Well, I like the tier 4 because that allows all my existing ships pretty much to work. The only one that I had to really make any changes to so far was the Creel War Carrier, removing some of its thrusters, which I didn't really want to do because it kind of looks stupid. But that's a really, really, really big ship with a lot of stuff in it. So that's bigger than I typically build anyway, being at a class 19, and also not only having a complete full range of weapons, in fact maximum weapon count, it also has 6 mining drills on it as well. So there's a lot of things on that ship sucking up CPU, and I had to cut some thrusters to make it all work and be 100% compliant to CPU. If I didn't cut the thrusters, it would be around 84% compliant. And if you happen to actually use that ship in your game, keep in mind all those placeholders where the thrusters used to be are still empty behind there, where literally in a couple minutes time I could just pop in 6 extra large thrusters in it again, and it would be back to its normal setup. So it's a very easy convert back on that one. All right, well, that's all I've got for today, and you all have a good day. If you have any questions or comments on anything, please let me know. Martian base, that's one last thing I didn't cover yet. I haven't done any work to it since the last time I showed it, and I was showing you the differences between concrete and carbon substrate on the texturing. Now I've got kind of a mixed, reaction on that. I've got some comments saying leave it carbon substrate, it looks better. I've got some comments saying to convert it to concrete because it's got more hit points and concrete's more available well, basically it's available on every planet, where the carbon substrate is better on temperate planets or planets that have a lot of trees and things like that. It's a rough one for me. I don't know. I haven't come to a final decision on that, and that's why I didn't really want to work on it. As an author, I hate using the concrete because of the texturing problems and things I get. And another side effect is if I decided to change my mind and go from concrete to some other material such as carbon or steel or any of those, it's a different texture palette, so it completely whacks out all the textures on the base. And that kind of sucks too. So I gotta pick one or the other and just go with it and be happy with it. Right now I am steering towards concrete due to the simple fact it doesn't cost more, and the concrete blocks have 600 hit points and the carbon substrate blocks have 200 hit points. Well, maximum hit points if it's a full block. So it makes more sense, and it can be built from, you can get concrete from a desert planet without any trees and stuff like that. So I'm kind of leaning that way, but I got to say it's gonna delay me on. It's gonna take extra work because I would have to kind of retexturize a lot of the base and things like that, and I probably won't like it quite as much at the end because of the differences in a lot of the textures, especially the base textures. Honestly, if the concrete had 2 more textures added to the palette, just 2 even. Oh, where am I going? These 2 here, it wouldn't be a big deal, but not having these and having the concrete have nothing, literally no flat textures available besides this this texture here, is where I'm really at odds with it. But there's other textures I like to use occasionally. This one once in a while, and especially this one, vents, this. I mean, these are all textures that are not available in the concrete set, but they're part of the main base theme I'm in texture range that I'm using in the creations. Now it does have some. It has this, thank goodness, has this one, has this one. So those work, but the other ones just don't. And so I basically, although I'm only using probably a total of about 10 to 15 textures on any given creation, if I go with concrete and try to do this look and style, I'm probably down to like 5 or 6 textures that I actually can use on the thing, and that really sucks. It's going to make it look worse than it could have looked. But I gotta think about function first over looks, I think, on that. And I'm hoping someday it's not that case. And I absolutely love the idea of having like a big texture palette, and you pick and choose what textures you want to use in that palette on a creation, and say you're limited to X number of textures. Like, I would be happy even with 1 page. I mean, if I had 1 page of textures, I could pick and choose which ones I wanted to use. I'd be totally content with that. That's plenty of textures for any single creation, for the most part. So even though there's 2 pages, so I mean, more the merrier. And who knows? Maybe sometimes I might want to use some wood in a certain area or some other texture for a specific reason. All right. Well, anyway, I will shut up, and you guys have a good day. I'll probably be doing another video Wednesday, hopefully with some updates to this and the Martian base. And I'm kind of getting excited to try to get back to that Creel tripod design as well too. That's going to be probably next, and then of course a big space carrier. So that's going to be another big project to pull off. I got some ideas, and this was kind of a test platform to test a chassis a bit. That's how this started, at least. It transformed into something I wasn't quite intending, but I went with it, and I'm happy I did because I dig it now. So, all right. You all have a good day. See you later.